Hey everyone, this is Daniel, and in today's video, we're going to look at Power Automate for Desktop variables. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. So, Daniel, in the previous 3 videos, you covered a lot about variables as well. What is so different about this one? Well, I'll tell you that in all the other videos, we only looked at the flow variables. In this one, we're going to start by looking at the input and the output variables. And that's very important because now when the flow will trigger, the first thing you're going to see is another dialog box that comes up and asks you, hey, what are the key variables you want to start with? And then when the flow ends, it will show you another dialog box of what your output variables are. So it's very important to stick around for this video. There's so much to learn. But first, here's my intro video. So let's get started. Now we are in our Power Automate for Desktop console. I've gone and named this one as Live Demo for Flow Variables. This is brand new. I haven't done any updates so far. On the left side over here, under Actions, you see Variables. And when I expand it, there's a whole bunch of actions under Variables, and we'll try to hit as many of those as possible. However, the one that I want to start with is on the right, in the Variable section over here. It's the input and the output variables. Because in the previous 3 videos, every variable I created was right inside the flow, and they all fell under this one. This is the one that we never paid attention to. This is the one that's going to be the primary focus of this video. So let's actually just start by creating some. What I want to do is actually go ahead and start taking some information from the get-go when the flow just gets triggered. So I'm going to go and start putting some information in, and it'll all begin to make sense very soon. So right over here, you see that plus sign? When you hover over it, it says add variable. When you click on it, it gives you 2 options, input and output. I'm going to start by input first. So I'll click on input, and this box opens up over here. Now there's quite a few information over here, so I'm going to break it down what are important. First of all is the variable name. So for example, when I go and remove that and I put this in, I'm going to say this is the var company name. When the flow gets triggered, the dialog box, one of the things it's going to ask you is, what is your company name? Then it is the data type, is what is the data type of this variable that you are populating. This is very important piece over here, because when we were creating the flow variables, the ones over here, we were not really had the opportunity or the option there to define what those variable types are. You basically did a set variable, you put some information in, and then you just assume that the variable will take the defined type. But over here, you actually tell what is the data type of the variable. So it's very important that you start off your flow in the correct way by actually using these input and output variables. All right, so I'm going to go and start with text. Then is the default value. Do you want to go ahead and give any default value? And we are very used to this kind of process. You either go ahead and give a default value to save the end user some time, or you can go and put in some more information of yours. So from this example, I'll actually go and put in something in. I'm going to say my company name is Contoso.Incorporated. All right, so here's another very important thing is the external name. And it's not very intuitive, so let me explain that to you. There is the variable name, and then there's the external name. So remember I just mentioned to you that when you trigger the flow, a dialog box comes up with saying that, hey, what is this variable about? Over there in the dialog box, it needs to make sense what you're asking the end user, and therefore is this external name. So for example, on the top, I just put that in under variable name. I said var company name, because that's helping me from building the flow logic standpoint. However, when the dialog box comes up, I'm going to ask the user what is the company name. All right, this actually makes sense. The user will actually be able to see that. Also, right over here is the decision you need to make, is that when the user is putting this information in, is it going to be any confidential or any private information? Because over there, you can go ahead and turn on the mark sensitivity. Because let's face it, somebody might actually be putting some confidential or a personal private information, and you really don't want the flow people to at least see what is going on over there, or at least when you're troubleshooting the flow. In those situations, you just don't want those information to be openly available. So make sure that here you make the decision. So I'm going to go and click on save right now. All right, and right over here under the input output variables, it shows me that, hey, you already have one variable now populated, and it's this information coming over here. So let's go and add a few more things. All right, so I'm going to click on the plus again. I'm going to go and click on input. Over here, I'm going to go and say var number of Asian employees, the data type, that is going to be of type number. And over here, I can already go ahead and populate a number. I'm going to say 300, and external type, external name, it's very important that you go and put this information in, and mine is going to be number of Asian employees. It's not sensitive information, so I can leave that as toggle off. Click on save. So we've already gone and put in two. One was of type text, the other one was type number. I'm actually going to go ahead and add another one of number of employees in USA. So I'll click on this plus over here. I'll click on the input, the variable name. I'll go and type this in as var number of employees in USA. I'll go and put that as number. Default one, I'll say this is going to be 150. External name, actual text, which says number of employees in USA. It's not sensitive information, so I can leave that as off, and I'll click on save. So we've already gone and added three of them. All right, so the next two are important types. They're going to be of type data table and of type list. But I want you to understand what is the difference between the two. So for that, let's go to the left side over here. So when you come to the left and we expand on this data table, there's a whole concept of create a new data table. And on the bottom, there's a whole concept of create a new list. So what is the difference between the two? There is a few, but the most important one is data will allow you to have multiple columns and multiple rows. Emphasis on columns. While list will only allow one column. That is it. You'll have multiple rows, but it only allows one column. So let's go and start adding some variables, and then you'll understand the difference between the two. So what I'll do is I'll come now again back to our input output variables. I'll click on plus, I'll click on input. I'm going to name this variable as var first list accessories. I'll click on the data type drop down and I'm going to put in list. Moment I do that, now the default value comes in as edit. So I'll click on edit and now I'm given this option to go and start putting some information in. So to put the information one item at a time or one row at a time, you click on the plus on the bottom, you select it inside and you start typing in something. So I'm going to say my accessories is going to be keyboard and these are the remaining ones. Now it starts with 0 and it works its way up to the 4, which means you've got a total of 5 items or rows in your list. And I'll go and click on save. And here it is. We've got all that information selected. Again, this is not private or personal information. I will go and leave that as toggled off. Click on save. And now we've got 4 of them. So we did the list. Let's go and add a data table as well. So again, this is going to be an input output variable. So again, come back onto the right side, click on the plus, click on input, and the data type is going to be of type data table. The variable name, I'll go and replace that with var fruits data table. And the external name, I'm just going to call that as fruits. I'll click on edit. And in edit, now we've got the option to go and populate our data table. To set a good example, I'm going to click on the column over here. When you select it and it gets highlighted, that means you can go ahead and edit it. So I'm going to type in the fruit. Like what is the actual fruit that you have? Then I'll select the second one, which is column 2. And I'm going to go ahead and type in quantity. Like how many of these do you have? Now I want to add another column. And so for that, you go all the way to the right and you click on this plus, and then that name shows up as a column 1. And I'll click on that and I'm going to go and type that in as distribution. So as you can see, I'm going to see what is the fruit name, how much quantity it is, and in which distribution or location it is situated in. So again, it starts always with the row number 0. The first row is always row number 0. Don't get confused. You might assume that the first one is row number 1. No, it starts with row number 0. So let's also go and populate some information over here. So I'll start with first typing in apples. Quantity, I'm going to put that in as 10. And distribution location is in Northeast. I'm just putting this assuming that it's North America. That's where I live in USA. So it's in the Northeast of USA. So that's how I put the first one in. This is how I went and put in the second one in grapes, 15, South. So what I'll do is I'll go and populate these other information in as well. Now, as you can see, I've gone ahead and populated a whole bunch of columns and rows inside my data table. And you always got to keep mindful that there's a scrolling bar on the right, which means I've got more than just 6, because 6 is by default. It shows me over here. In fact, it's 7 because it's 0 and 6, so there's 7. But if you want to see the 8th one, you can actually scroll down, or you can come all the way to the right over here. The moment you see the expanding type of icon, you can go and expand it, and you're able to see more. So this is the data that I went ahead and manually submitted as my input variable. And we did 2 of those. We went ahead and added as a list, and we went ahead and added that as a data table. So I'll go and click on save. Everything looks good. I'll make sure I put the external name as well. No description needed. It is not sensitive. So I'll go and click on save. For the list one, I don't recall me adding actually a external name. So there you go. I need to actually submit an external name. Submit an external name. I'll just go highlight that and I'll call that in as fruits. And I'll go and click on save. So we will go and now save this. We will be act as good stewards. We'll go ahead and click on save. So we'll actually save each and every one of these things. Now, as you can see over here, we've got nothing in our flow. The main flow, there's nothing. I don't even have any subflows over here. See, there's no subflow. So therefore, I can't do any run, stop, or run as action. However, if I now went down to outside the console, right over here, see, this is the one live demo for flow variables, the one I just created. If I go and click on play over here, this is where the flow inputs is actually asked for. And do you see now the importance of how we went ahead and added that input? The name, you see the name, the default name, that's so important. I mean, and you see the name that comes in, so important. It is not the actual flow, which is the var company name. No, you actually got the text that you put in. And you can actually put in text with spaces and with all of these characters like a question marks. It'll accept all of them. And then we also got the default values in. It's all over there for the fruits, and I actually confused a little bit for the fruits and the docking station. If I click on the edit, it shows you all this information. You are allowed to go ahead and edit it. It's already populated. So if I just click on OK right now, now it says preparing, currently editing. But if I go back in actually inside the console, over here on the right, you actually see the information coming in. Now, again, in my situation, I pre-populated it, so that's not really a good example, but you get the idea that in order for me to go and put in the flow inputs, it doesn't work inside this run, inside the console. You actually need to go outside the console, click on run, and that's where you actually see the option to put in your flow inputs. Very important point for you to understand that. So we went ahead and added all the inputs. Let's go and add one output as well. So again, come back to the top right, click on the plus. This time I select output, and the output I'm going to put in as the var final output. I'll leave it as text. Again, you've got options over here. I'll leave it as text, and I'm going to go and say final information, leave it as is, and I'll click on save. I'll leave that over here for now because now I can actually go ahead and put in some information at the end. Important thing about the final output is, or the output variable, is it'll always show up at the end after the last action has run. Then the pop-up comes in for the final output variable. So we've gone ahead and taken now input variables. Now let's actually still go to our variables and start adding some flow variables, these ones over here, to manipulate some of those input variables. And in that case, I'll be able to show you how some of these things work. So right under variables, way at the bottom, there is something called as set variables. When I click, and I'll do a drag and drop, and I'll drop it over here. And this one, the new variable, when I select it, I'll just do a paste. It's going to be a var number of employees. And now what I want to do is I'm going to take those two ones, because I have employees from the Asia and I have employees from the North America, and I'm going to go and give a sum of that. But how do I do that? Like that, it's just a simple plus sign, but there's a slight syntax change that you need to make. So check this out. Inside now in the value, I'll click on this X for formula, and I'll select it, and I'm going to go and get the two numbers, which is the var number of Asian employees. Select it, and I'll click on select, and I come over here and I just do a plus. Then I'll come over here, click on the X, and then I'm going to get the number of employees for USA. Select it, click on save, and when I go and click on run, let's just see what happens. All right, so we've got all this information, but you see under flow variables, it just gave me 300 plus 150. Well, that's not what I wanted. I wanted a plus. I wanted a sum. I was actually expecting 450. So what did I do wrong? Because I didn't get any errors either. So this is where we got to start getting used to how you use these variables over here, all right? So what it did was it accepted this whole thing as one variable. It accepted the plus as text, and then it accepted the right side as another variable. If you want the two to work as something where you want to do a sum, the trick is go ahead and take out this percent. Keep this percent out, remove this percent on the right as well. The two ones which are on the inner side, the inner left on the inner right, remove those, but you want to keep the percents outside. That way, what it understands is that, hey, this is still an overall variable, but I'm taking the two variables and I'm going to get a sum of them, which is using the plus. So now when I go and did by the way, when I made this change, I didn't get any errors, because Power Automate for desktop is fantastic at identifying your errors and bringing that to your attention really fast. In this case, we didn't get any errors, so everything looks good there. Click on save. Now when I click on run, it finishes, and see on the right side over here, it gave me 450. So that is one of the biggest lessons that I want to teach you, is that when you start doing this manipulation inside variables, you got to be very careful where those percent signs falls, okay? But let's kind of build on this. Let's just take it to the next level. Click on cancel. I'm going to come back on the bottom left over here, which says set variable, do a drag and a drop. And this one, I'm going to rename that to var employee information. And now I want to do that combination, which is writing off the text and putting in the variables, and just see how that works. So I'm going to say John Doe works for, and I'm going to go and get the company name, the first company, which was the var company. So let's go and grab that var company name, select that, and then works for the var company name. which has how many employees? Well, we went and did that sum over there. So we went and get the var number of employees. I'll select that, click on save. And now if I go and do a run, it already went in and got the input variable. So it's not asking us over here because we're inside the console. The two of them ran. And then on the right over here, if I go on the side, it sees the second, the flow variable. This is the var employee. And if I move my house and I just keep it on that, the full text come in is that John Doe works for Contoso Incorporated, which has 450 variables. So over there, we did a text of where we were able to still add text, but we also took the manipulated variable and was able to show that on that side. All right, but I still want to keep building upon this because all I showed you was text over here with the variables. How do I go ahead and manipulate even more those numbers over there? Because here on the first one, we just did a sum, which is a plus. Well, what if I want to do a division? What if I want to do a percentage? Well, let's do both of those together. So the first thing I want to do is let's go ahead and start creating the percentage. Percentage would mean I would go ahead and take all of the Asian employees divided by the number of employees and then multiply that by 100. Let's see what that looks like. So in order for me to just see it, just display it, well, let's go and get the display from the message box. So I'll get this display. By the way, on the actions, I just search for this. Under message boxes, I grab that display message, I do a drag and I drop over here, and we'll just leave this as the percentage of Asian employees. I'll just type that in, and here as well we'll do some manipulation. So I want to get the percentage of Asian employees. So for that, I got to click on that side, which is on the X over here, and then I'm going to go ahead and get what is the bar number of Asian employees. So let me select that, and then I'll put in the division. I got to go ahead and get the total. The bar number of employees came as a flow variable, select that, and then I want to go ahead and multiply that by 100. So, well, in order for me to do that, I got to put this open brackets, and I got to go ahead and do the close brackets, and then I'll go ahead and hit the asterisk for multiplication, and then I'll put in 100. Well, let's see how this looks, all right? So I'll click on save, and I'll click on run. It went ahead and set all the variables. But see, this came up as 300 divided by 450. Basically, it just put in the text that it showed. Now, granted, it went and applied the variables. It put in the number, but it did not show us the actual percentage that we want. So again, it's all about the syntax, all right? So we got to go and now change that syntax. First things first is this percent sign. I got to go ahead and now do all that change. So basically, take out all these percent signs which are in there. All of them, go ahead and remove that right here, okay? Next is go on the left side, way up on the beginning, go ahead and add your percent right there. And wait till the entire calculation is done. So all the way to the right, past the 100, go ahead and now end it with that percent. That means that you are saying that, hey, these are still variables and values that I am using. Inside it is doing all of this stuff, this calculation, this addition, subtraction, multiplication, all that. It's doing all of this stuff, and it's going to display all of that as one value. Therefore, the percent is all the way to the left, percent is all the way to the right. Now I'll click on save. We'll go ahead and be good stewards by saving it. And now we'll go ahead and do a run. So it goes through really fast, and it gives me this big round number, which is 66.666666 all the way here. Hey, but it calculated all the percentage, which is pretty neat. But this is way too much of a number. How do I go ahead and round this up to say up to 2 places or things like that? Well, there is actually an action called round up. So let's go and use that. So I come to the actions, and it's actually not round up. It's called truncate. Truncate a number. Okay, so did a search. It actually falls under variables. And so basically just so you see that we are kind of now starting to take advantage of all these other variables as well. Truncate is the one that we're going to start using. So I'll click on it, drag it, I'll drop it, and right now over here, the number that I want to truncate and how I want to do in the operations is going to be a round number, and round number will go and do that up to 2 decimal places. But here is the number that we need to truncate. Now, I didn't go ahead and take that entire display, the step number 3. I didn't go and save that to a variable. I just went ahead and put that in as is. So we got to go ahead and rebuild that again. So in order for me to create the whole thing, I just will come back over there, click on the step number 3, highlight the whole thing, do a Control C, cancel out of there. I'll go ahead and get that truncate number, drag it, drop it. The number that I want to truncate, I'm going to paste it right now. And it's going to be of a type round number up to 2 decimal places. Click on it, save it. And I will now go ahead and actually just drag this display down because I don't need to show that. Right, I'm going to select it as I'm going to show, delete that, percentage. The percentage is actually going to be the truncated value, right there, truncated value. And what we'll do actually is even make it even more easier, is this truncated one, I'm going to say Asia truncated value, right? So that way it makes a little bit more sense. Display message, click on that, get all of this deleted because we've already done the calculation before. Click on the variable section, it's going to be Asia truncated value, select, save, and now let's go and do a run. So in the run, it goes through all of this. In the display, see 66.67. So it not only did it in the truncate was round up to 2 places, decimal places, and it rounded up the last one, which is 6 to 7, so we got 66.67. So we got the value, the Asia truncated value. We've got the correct value, but how should I go and display that as a proper text? Because this is not just a number, that's 66.7, it's actually a percentage, and it is a percentage tied to Asia. So I want to display that properly inside the Asia, this display message. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to actually go ahead and type that in perfectly. I'm going to say total number of employees equals, let's go and grab that total, the one that we did up over here, the sum, which is var number of employees. Let's go and grab that. That is our internal one, the flow variable. So var number of employees. I got that, and then I can say of which I want to say so many percent. So Asian percent, so many percent. So that's already my number over there. I want to add in a percent is Asian. Now let's go and click on the save. And the moment I do that, I get an error. It's basically saying that message to display syntax error. See, the error is right over here. What it did not like is this percent after the variable's ending percent. So you see that Asia truncated value, it's got that percent over there. After it ended for that variable, I went and added another percent. It didn't like that. It gave me an error over there, okay? Well, how do I solve that? Because I need a way to display that to make sense in this message. So now you've got to go in and start manipulating that piece of it as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to now come back. I'll leave the title as is. In the message box, here's how you go and say this. First, you come back to the Asia truncated value. In there, you go and click on a plus. Now you go ahead and come to this section over here, that percent, and you go and put in single quotes. That's how you do it, single quotes over there, all right? And then I'm going to go and leave everything as is, click on save, see that error went away. I'll go and click on run, and when I go and click on run, it went through all of those, and now it's coming up with all this correct information. See, 66, the total number of employees equals 450, of which 6.67% is Asian. So let's go and take a look at it one more time. It was a very minor syntax change, but it's an important one. Is that inside the Asian truncated value variable, if you want to go ahead and add another hard text to it, whatever is the text location, go and put in the plus before or after, and the text needs to be under single quotes. That is how we went ahead and manipulated that text, and now we were able to get the actual calculated value and even put in the text being the percent, and that was just a good challenge, but this is how you do manipulation of those variables. So now that you've gotten comfortable with how to go ahead and manipulate the percent, I want to build on top of that by now referencing the data table. So in the data table, we went ahead and actually created a full data table in the input side, input variables. And just to make sure you understand, we go back into our input variable. This was the input variable. I click on the edit. This was all the information that we added directly inside the input table. How I want to manipulate this is I want to add actually another row over here. And how do I do that, right? Because I could directly come over here and do it and click on the plus, but that's part of my overall input process. I want to go ahead and add that as my overall flow because I could have manipulated some data somewhere in some other actions and I want to add another row. How do I do that? Well, when you go now on the top left again under variables, expand the data variable, there is an option to insert row into data table. Again, click on it, hold it down, drag it, and then drop it over here. And this is the section to go ahead and insert the data table row. Again, there's a syntax for that, and you need to understand what that syntax is. So the first things first is what was my table? The table was bar. It's basically in the input side. Don't scroll all the way to the bottom. It's not under flow variables. It's on the input side, and we call that as bar fruits data table. Selected, click on select, and there you go. That's our data table. Now we've got a few ways to work on this. Is before which row? Or is it going to be at the end of the table? Now, if you're going and adding more data, more than likely it's going to be at the end of the table. However, you have the option to go ahead and put it before a certain row. Now, remember, rows, the first row starts with number 0. So if you want to go and put this up at the first one, you want to go and say before row index number 0, all right? So I'll go and leave that at the end as is, but you can always put that at the blank side. Now, how do I go ahead and add this data? There is a syntax for that too. So the new row I'm going to add is the fruit name is going to be strawberry. It is quantity is going to be 20 and the distribution is going to be east. So those are the 3 items for each of the columns. Here is the syntax. We are going to first go ahead and put in the percent right there. And I'm going to go ahead and open a square bracket, close a square bracket, and I'm going to go ahead and put in this other percent. Okay. This is basically the overall syntax. Now, how many columns do I have? I have 3 columns. So single quotes twice, then a comma. Again, single quotes twice, then a comma, and another single quotes. So I've got basically 3 single quotes. And here is where I start adding some information. So this is going to be strawberries, all right? The quantity I have is 20. And this is going to be in the east location. And so I can go and click on save. Again, it doesn't give me any errors. That's a good sign. So I'll go and click on save. Now I'll go and click on run. All of this should run through pretty fast. And here, okay, display message was there. That's fine. And then it went through the insert and it was completed. So we'll go ahead and grab another display message, get a display message box, drag it down over here. I'll go and say fruits. In the message, I'll click on the variable section, and this is going to be of type fruits data table. Select it as this. I'll click on save. What I'll do is I'll come to this display message now, and I'll go ahead and click on disable action. That will just run through it. Click on run. Everything should just go through just fine, and the message should come up. So right over here now, we are seeing the apples 10 and the northeast, but if I scroll all the way to the bottom, I should see the strawberries as well. It is displaying it well. Another thing is that right over here on the input variables, now it's giving me the count number 9. If I open this up, it tells me initially when you were just putting the input that there were only 8 rows. There were 3 columns, but there were only 8 rows. However, when you go ahead and add an action, it does go ahead and update the overall variable counts. And right here on the right side, you see that the overall weight counts is now 8 plus 1 because we inserted another row. So it does update the overall variable count as well. So this is how we were able to manipulate the overall data table. But again, let's keep building on top of this. What I want to show you is another neat trick of how you can take the data table and go ahead and extract only a column from it. For that, you use the retrieve data table column into a list. So again, select it, drag and drop, and the data table that we are going to use, again, click on the variables. This did come from our overall input output variables, and granted, it will have the updated row as well. This is from our fruits data table. I'll select that. And right here, you want to tell it what was the column that you used. If you can't remember, that's fine. We'll click on cancel. I'll go back to our variable, double click on that. I'll click on the edit over here, and I'm going to go ahead and use the fruit column. Okay, so it's important that you know what that is, how it spells. It's the fruit column. So I'll go ahead and grab that, cancel this. Again, grab that action, go ahead and drag it, drop it over here. Data table, this was our fruits data table. Selected that. And for the column that I want, it's just fruit. So I think it was just fruit. I don't think it was fruits. We'll figure that out in a second. And the variable name, I want to change that variable name. So I'll click on it, and then I'll just go and type this in. It's just secondly list accessories. It's a second list accessories. Click on save. And now if I go and do a run, we should be able to see how everything over here runs. Display message, okay, it gave us all of this. And now we've also got another list, and it shows up again in our flow variables. So if I click on it, it'll actually tell me here are the other ones that you went and got. See, it now took the data table. It also took the column that we wanted, and all that information from a data table was taken directly and put into a list just by one action over here. That is the beauty of the manipulation of these variables. But in this list, I have some duplicates. So how do I go ahead and do that? Well, there's a built-in action directly what they call remove duplicate items from a list. So if I again grab that, drag and drop it, okay, if I grab that, drag and drop it over here, we can go and do that. So list to remove duplicate items, well, that is now going to come from our flow variable. It's called secondary list accessories. Just to be sure, I'll move this down. When I retrieve the data table, I name that as secondary list accessories. I got that, and it's giving me more functionality. So do you want to ignore text while searching for the duplicate ones, or do you want to be very specific? Well, I'll say I can ignore it for now, and I'll go and say that is right here. It removed all the duplicate items. So if I were to go and run it, it goes ahead and goes through the entire process. Yeah, shows me all the new ones. Strawberry is good too. Went and did the retrieve. And now if I go and click on it, you'll see that I only have these many. I don't have any duplicates. So it's a very important point for you to understand over here. when we went ahead and used this action, it did not ask us that, hey, do you want to take all of this action output and put it somewhere else? No, it took the existing variable that we have, the flow variable, and it manipulated that right there. Something to keep in mind that if you don't want that to happen for whatever reason, then you want to go and copy this directly to another variable or list variable and then manipulate that list variable. Because when we do this action, it will update that existing flow list, and there's nothing you can do about that. All right. The only thing is you can take that action out, but it manipulates directly that. See, it did not give us any option to save it to another variable. It didn't automatically create the variable. It goes and manipulates that right there. Very important point to understand is that there's no output variable. It will go ahead and update that existing variable. Now, when it comes to the data tables, it was easy for us to go and add a whole bunch of items right at the input output variable side. It was also easy for us to insert a row. Well, how do I display it? Because I want to show a scenario where I want to just show you the top and the bottom, the first and the last. How do I do that? And for that, there are again some more expressions that we need to use. So first, let me just go ahead and get the display message, because that is where I'll be able to show you the actual syntax. So I'm going to grab that information over here, and I'm going to just say first and last items of the table. And here, I'm going to go and put in the information. Okay, so the first item, all right? So the first item, I'm going to now go and grab our var fruits data table right there, okay? Now you've got this percent before and at the end. In the end, go one to the left, all right? So I see this was all the way outside, the cursor is all the way outside. I take it to the left, and now I'm going to go and get the 0, because remember, 0 is the first row. This is what will give me the first row information. So you already got it. For the last row, I basically need to get the last item. Well, how do I get that? For that, there's a little trick. There is actually the built-in count. For each of the tables or any of the lists, it automatically out of the box will do a count. But the count will give me the last item. So for example, if we go now and take a look at our data table, and we open this up, the count is actually 8. In fact, it tells you right here, there's 8 rows. The count is actually 8. But the actual ID number, see that ID number is 7. So the trick is go ahead and get the count minus 1, and that will give you the last row over here. Just to make sure, let's go back in, it'll make more sense when we show it. So I'm going to say first item, and we gave that information. I'm going to say now last item. I'll go ahead and again get that same variable, which is the var fruits table, and then inside the percent, I'm going to open up the brackets, close the brackets, and while my cursor is inside, I'm going to go back into our variables. I'm going to go back into our fruits data table, and I'm going to get this rows count selected, and I'll go and do that. It actually does, again, gives me the variables. So I need to remove the percent of that variable. Remember, I always said keep it on the front and keep it at the end. I did that, and now I can come back to the end inside the brackets, subtracted by 1. I'll click on save. Again, no errors came up. So let's go ahead and now do a run. Yeah, that display message comes up. We can go and click on OK. It went ahead and now gave me this. Apples, which was the first item. Last item was the strawberries. And see, it works because we did that subtract for the count rows, and it works over here. It works really well. Okay, so the last one I want to talk about is also manipulating some of the JSON code, the JavaScript object notation. For that, first, I'm going to go and grab this one. Convert JavaScript object notation to a custom object. So let me go grab this, put it down over here, and it'll start to make sense. Here is an example of my JavaScript custom notation or JSON. I've already got some data over here. All right, I put that in as a, the script that it wants. Variable is pretty good. I'll leave it as is. Now what we do is we need a way to display each and every one of those items using a very specific syntax. So again, we go ahead and now get a display message. See, I get the display message, and I want to show you how we can actually get each and every one of those objects. So I'll just type this in. Okay. Now in the message, I'm going to show you something interesting. First is I want to get individual names. How do I get the name John? How do I get the age? And in the cars, I just want to get the BMW. Well, how do I do that in this message? So all three of them are going to use the exact same variable. If I open this up, they're using this variable. So for each and every one, we've got to reference that variable. So let me go and cancel this one, grab the display message, drop it down, and I just put that in as JSON, and inside the message, I gotta go ahead and now grab the variables. Right in the bottom in the flow variable is our JSON as custom objects. I'll select that, and now it goes ahead and gives me the variable. So I got to highlight it. I'll do a Control C, and then I got to paste it once. I got to paste it again. Here's how we're going to go and manipulate it. So for the first row, okay, for the first line item, you go one to the left inside the percent. Now I click on the point, and I got to go and reference what is that item. So the name that we want is John, but what is John? Well, it's a name. So come back into our message to display and type in name. That's all you got to do. So if you figure it out, for the next one of getting the age 30, it's falling under age. So I got to go and now come back in on the second item, click age, and we can do that. Now I've already got your wheels turning. You kind of understand, okay, for the cars, obviously I got to type in cars over here. But which car is it? It is the BMW. So it is the second one, but you understand now how the Power Automate works, is that it's not the number 2, it's actually going to be number 1, because there's a 0 and then there's a 1. So even though it is the second item, the actual number that we need to get is 1. And here's how you put it. You open up a square brackets, you put 1, you close the square brackets, and this is basically how it works. So I'll go and click on save. So I'm not getting any errors for any syntax, so it looks promising. Let's go and actually, this display message, I will go ahead and disable that action. The other display message, again, I'll go ahead and display that, disable that action. So everything should go through, and all we will get is the last one. So I'll click on run. Everything is going through, and there you go. It picked up John, which is right there. It picked up the name, and then from the cars, it picked up the BMW. So this is how we were also able to manipulate the JSON custom object. And finally, let's not forget, we need to populate our output variable. Remember, right at the beginning, we came and we added this output variable. We named it as var final output. So as I double click on it, I get to see that this is all there is. I've created the variable. It is of a data type text, and that's what it is. So what I'm going to do now is, for that variable, I've got to get that variable populated. And for that, it's pretty simple. Go back to our variables, and we will go ahead and set that variable. So I'm going to drag the set variable down, this section for the variables, click on the X piece, click on that, and there you go ahead and grab the final output. Click on that one. So that's going to be the one that is set. Here, go ahead and put in whatever you want. I'm going to actually grab the first one, which was the set variables right on the top. I'll grab that, click on save. I'm going to be good stewards, click on this save again. And now we got to go back outside the console. Back outside, and I'm going to click on the play. And it's going to give us two things. It's going to give us the inputs, everything is good, and it will run through all the actions. And at the end, it gave me the final output, which is all this information. Remember, inputs and outputs can only be seen outside the console, and it works really well. So I know we covered a lot, but I still feel like we only scratched the surface. The key point of this video was to differentiate between the input-output variables and the flow variables. And I showed you how, after taking those input variables, we were able to manipulate the information and then assign them to the flow variables, and then use the flow variables for further manipulation. So hopefully this video was useful to you. And as always, keep using Power Automate for desktop. Hello, hello, hello. So if you like this video, go ahead and click on that subscribe button and smash that like button. Also, if you have a few extra seconds, can you go ahead and put in a comment? Either say something nice or give me ideas for my next video. And until then, see ya.